Oh man, look at this. You got the whole GM patch and everything. That is priceless. What, you think they're gonna let you walk in here with that old briefcase and buy this monster?
I'm just here to watch, same as you.
Yeah, sure you are.
Done?
A homeless black man stood in front of a billion-dollar company's factory floor, surrounded by engineers who couldn't solve a problem that was costing them millions. His clothes were torn, his hands were calloused, his stomach was empty. And when he said, "I can fix it for a meal," they didn't just refuse. They laughed, they mocked him, they filmed him. But what happened next would silence that entire room and expose a truth about genius, dignity, and the color of respect in America. This is the story of a man the world decided to throw away until he proved he was the only one who could save them. His name was Marcus Webb, and what he did with those hands they laughed at would change everything.
Marcus Webb wasn't always homeless. There was a time when he wore steel-toed boots that weren't held together with duct tape, a time when his name was stitched above the pocket of a crisp work uniform, a time when he walked through the gates of General Motors' Detroit plant and other men nodded at him with respect. Not pity, not disgust, but respect. For 17 years, Marcus was one of the best diesel engine technicians GM ever had. He could hear problems in an engine before diagnostic computers caught them. He could feel irregularities in a crankshaft's rotation with his bare hands. Old-timers used to say Marcus had a gift, that he could talk to machines, and they'd listen. But gifts don't pay medical bills. When his wife, Angela, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, Marcus made a choice. He worked double shifts, took out loans, maxed out credit cards, sold their house, drained every account. He sat beside her hospital bed every night, holding her hand while the machines beeped and hummed. And when she passed 3 years later, Marcus was left with something worse than grief. He was left with $340,000 in debt. The bank took everything: his car, his belongings, the small apartment he'd moved into. Within 6 months of losing Angela, Marcus lost his address. He tried to keep working, but without a permanent residence, without a vehicle, without the mental stability to pretend everything was fine, GM let him go. Workforce restructuring, they called it. Marcus became invisible. He moved between shelters, slept in his old GM jacket when the weather turned cold, carried his toolbox in a battered leather briefcase Angela had given him on their 10th anniversary. Most of his tools had been pawned over the years, but he kept a few. A torque wrench, some socket sets, a small multimeter. They were all he had left of who he used to be. People crossed the street to avoid him now. Deli owners shooed him away from their doorsteps. Teenagers filmed him for social media mockery, and Marcus endured it all with a quiet dignity that Angela would have been proud of. He didn't beg aggressively. He didn't curse at the world. He simply tried to survive one day at a time. But survival wasn't living. On a cold November morning, Marcus walked past PowerTech Motors, a massive automotive manufacturing facility on the outskirts of Detroit. PowerTech wasn't GM, but it supplied engine components to half the industry. And that morning, there was chaos outside the main production building. Engineers in polo shirts stood around a massive diesel engine mounted on a test platform. Laptop screens glowed. Diagnostic cables ran everywhere, and everyone looked frustrated. No, beyond frustrated. They looked desperate. Marcus slowed his walk. His eyes scanned the engine from 50 feet away. Even from that distance, he could see the problem, or at least he could see the symptoms. The irregular scorch marks around the fuel injector housing, the slight misalignment of the turbocharger mounting, the way the engineers kept checking the same compression readings over and over, like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Marcus knew that look. He'd worn it himself years ago, back when he was younger and less experienced. It was the look of someone who knew something was catastrophically wrong, but couldn't figure out what. His feet moved before his brain caught up. He walked through the open gate, past the security guard who was too distracted by his phone to notice a homeless man entering a secure facility. He walked across the parking lot, past the expensive cars that once looked like his. He walked right up to the edge of the crowd, clutching his briefcase, and he watched. And then, without thinking, he spoke. "It's your cam phasing." The words came out quietly, almost a whisper, but in the frustrated silence of that moment, they might as well have been shouted. Every head turned, every eye found Marcus, and the laughter started almost immediately. The first laugh came from a young engineer near the front, a kid who couldn't have been older than 25, wearing a PowerTech polo that looked freshly pressed. He glanced at Marcus, then at his colleagues, then back to Marcus, and the laugh bubbled out of him like he couldn't contain it. Did this dude just... He couldn't even finish the sentence. More laughter followed, nervous at first, then bolder. A woman with a tablet nudged her coworker and pointed at Marcus with her chin. Two men in the back pulled out their phones, cameras already recording. Marcus stood still, his briefcase hanging from one weathered hand. A tall, white man in his 40s stepped forward. His name tag read Derek Sullivan, Chief Engineer. He had the kind of confident stride that came from never being questioned, never being doubted, never being dismissed. He stopped 3 feet from Marcus and folded his arms. "Cam phasing," Derek repeated, his voice dripping with condescension. "You think it's the cam phasing?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. Your intake cam is retarded about 4 degrees. That's why your compression's off and your combustion temperature's spiking in cylinder 3 and 5. Derek's smile widened. He turned to his team. "Did everyone hear that? This man," he gestured at Marcus like he was presenting evidence, "this gentleman thinks we haven't checked the cam phasing on a VVT system that we designed." The laughter grew louder. "Sir," Marcus said quietly, "I wasn't trying to—" "What's your name?" Derek interrupted. "Marcus Webb." "Well, Marcus Webb, do you have a degree in mechanical engineering?" "No, sir, but I worked at GM for 17 years as a—" "So that's a no. No degree. And let me guess, no current employment either, right?" The crowd went quiet. The kind of quiet that's worse than laughter, because everyone's listening now, waiting to see what happens next. Marcus's jaw tightened. "No, sir. Not currently." "Right." Derek made a show of looking Marcus up and down, the torn jacket, the worn jeans, the boots held together with tape and ope. "Look, buddy, I don't know what you're trying to do here. Maybe you're looking for a handout, maybe you're just confused, but this is a professional facility. We have actual engineers working on this problem. Engineers with degrees, with certifications, with credentials." "I understand. I just thought you thought you'd walk in off the street and solve a problem that a team of 12 trained professionals has been working on for 6 hours?" Derek's voice was getting louder now, performing for the crowd. "Do you understand how insulting that is? Do you understand how arrogant that sounds?" Marcus took a breath. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something else. Humiliation, exhaustion, the crushing weight of being invisible until you're suddenly too visible. "I wasn't trying to insult anyone," Marcus said. "I was hungry. I thought maybe if I could help, you might—" He didn't get to finish. "Oh, here we go." Derek threw his hands up theatrically. "Now we get to the truth. You want money. You want a handout. You want us to pay you for your expertise." He made air quotes with his fingers. "Not money. Just a meal. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. I just thought if I could fix it, maybe someone could spare." The laughter exploded again, louder this time, crueler. "A meal?" Derek turned to his team, his voice full of mock amazement. "Guys, this is incredible. This man is willing to fix our multi-million-dollar engine problem for a sandwich. What a deal! Should we take him up on it?" The crowd ate it up. Phones were definitely recording now. Someone in the back was live streaming. This was content. This was entertainment. "Homeless man thinks he's an engineer" would get thousands of views. Marcus felt his chest tighten. This was a mistake. He should leave. He should walk away before this got worse. But then his eyes found the engine again. And he saw it, clear as day, the way the variable valve timing actuator was positioned. The way the diagnostic screen showed asymmetric cylinder performance. The way the entire assembly was compensating for a timing error that was so simple, so fundamental, that these engineers probably overlooked it because they were looking for something complex. "I can fix it," Marcus said again, louder this time. "Excuse me? I can fix that engine. Give me 30 minutes. If I can't fix it, I'll leave. If I do fix it, you give me a meal. That's all I'm asking." The crowd went silent again. Derek stared at Marcus for a long moment. Then he smiled, but this time it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just been handed an opportunity. "You know what? Sure, let's do it." Derek gestured grandly toward the engine. "Go ahead, Marcus Webb. Fix our unfixable engine. In front of everyone, with all these cameras rolling. And when you can't, when you waste everyone's time and prove you're just another con artist looking for sympathy, I want you to leave and never come back. Deal?" Marcus swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away. This was a trap. This was humiliation waiting to happen. These people didn't want him to succeed. They wanted him to fail. They wanted the spectacle. They wanted the content. "Homeless man thinks he's an engineer" would get thousands of views. But Marcus was so tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being dismissed. Tired of pretending the world hadn't chewed him up and spit him out. And maybe, just maybe, if he could do this one thing, if he could prove just for a moment that he was still the man Angela believed in, then it would be worth it. He set his briefcase down, he walked toward the engine, and behind him, Derek whispered to a colleague, "This is going to be good," as someone turned a camera to capture every angle of what they all assumed would be a spectacular failure. Marcus approached the engine like a man approaching an altar. His hands, scarred and calloused from years of labor and months of survival, moved carefully across the housing. He ignored the phones recording him. He ignored the whispers and the poorly suppressed giggles. He let it all fade into white noise. There was only him and the machine. He knelt beside the diagnostic computer, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. A younger engineer stepped forward. "Whoa, hey, you can't just—" "Let him," Derek said from behind. "Let him dig his own grave." Marcus pulled up the cam timing data. He scrolled through the sensor readings. He checked the correlation between crankshaft position and camshaft position for each bank. And there it was, exactly what he'd suspected. The intake cam on bank 2 was retarded by 4.3 degrees. Not enough to trigger a critical fault code, but enough to create asymmetric combustion, elevated exhaust temperatures, and the exact failure pattern they were seeing. But that wasn't the whole problem. Marcus stood and moved to the engine itself. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out his torque wrench, a beautiful old snap-on tool that Angela had saved up 3 months to buy him. His hands remembered its weight like a dancer remembers choreography. "What's he doing?" someone whispered. "Probably about to strip a bolt and make it worse," another voice answered. Marcus located the VVT actuator cover. He removed 4 bolts with practiced precision, his movements economical and confident. When he lifted the cover, several engineers leaned in despite themselves. Even Derek took a step closer. Inside, the variable valve timing actuator was covered in a thin layer of carbon buildup, but that wasn't the issue. The issue was the actuator solenoid itself. It was sticking, not failing completely, but hanging up just enough to create inconsistent cam phasing. The computer kept trying to correct it, but the mechanical response lagged, creating a feedback loop of adjustments that never fully resolved. It was a $15 part, causing a $1 million problem. Marcus reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a small spray can, contact cleaner he'd been carrying for weeks, hoping to trade it for a few dollars at a pawn shop. He sprayed the solenoid, worked it back and forth manually, then cleaned the housing. "That's not going to," an engineer started. Marcus held up a hand, not rudely, just wait. He reassembled the actuator cover, torqued the bolts to spec by feel, and then did something that Derek's eyes narrowed. Marcus reached into the diagnostic computer and manually reset the adaptive cam timing tables, forcing the ECU to relearn everything from scratch. You can't just reset the adaptive. He just did, Derek said quietly, his voice no longer mocking. Now he just sounded curious, and maybe a little worried. Marcus stepped back from the engine. "Try it," he said simply. Derek hesitated. For the first time since this circus began, he looked uncertain. If this homeless man actually fixed the problem, what did that say about Derek, about his team, about the entire hierarchy of credentials and respectability they'd built their identities on? But the cameras were rolling. The crowd was watching. Derek couldn't back down now. He nodded to a technician. "Start it." The technician initiated the startup sequence. The engine turned over. Once. Twice. Then it roared to life. But this time, it didn't sound like a machine tearing itself apart. This time it sounded smooth, powerful. The exhaust note was even. The vibration was minimal. The diagnostic screen, which had been lit up like a Christmas tree with warning codes, started clearing. One code gone. Then another. Then another. Cylinder temperatures equalized, compression readings balanced across all 6 cylinders. The engine ran at exactly the specifications it was designed for. Perfect. The crowd went absolutely silent. Marcus stood with his hands at his sides, his briefcase at his feet, and he didn't need to say a word. The engine spoke for him. Derek stared at the diagnostic screen. His face had gone pale. He looked at Marcus, then at the screen, then at his team. And for just a moment, something flickered across his expression. Not quite shame, not quite respect, but maybe the beginning of understanding that he'd just learned something terrible about himself. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Holy shit." The phones were still recording. The live stream was still running. But now the content was very, very different than what anyone expected. Marcus picked up his briefcase. "I'll take that meal now, if the offer still stands."
For a moment, nobody moved. Derek Sullivan stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, his confidence completely shattered. Around him, engineers who'd spent the entire morning laughing at Marcus now couldn't meet his eyes. The phones that had been recording Marcus's expected humiliation had instead captured something far more powerful and far more uncomfortable. They'd captured proof that genius doesn't require degrees, that knowledge doesn't require an address, that a man sleeping in shelters could see what a team of credentialed professionals had missed. They'd captured the moment America's assumptions about worth and dignity crumbled in real time. Finally, Derek cleared his throat. "Get him—" His voice cracked. He tried again. "Get him something to eat. From the cafeteria, whatever he wants." A younger engineer, the same one who'd laughed first, nodded quickly and disappeared toward the building. But he didn't come back with a meal from the cafeteria. He came back with Paul Hendricks. Paul Hendricks was PowerTech Motors' CEO, a man who'd built the company from a small machine shop into a major industry supplier. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of actual work before decades of executive leadership. He walked straight to Marcus and extended his hand. "Paul Hendricks," he said, "I heard what happened here. I watched the footage." Marcus shook his hand, uncertain where this was going. "My father was a machinist, worked 40 years on factory floors, never finished high school. Smartest man I ever knew." He paused, his jaw tight. "What happened here today shouldn't have happened. You were disrespected, you were humiliated, and you still fixed a problem that was costing us $17,000 an hour in delayed production." He turned to Derek. "You're suspended. 2 weeks, no pay, and you're going to attend every diversity and bias training we offer. If I ever hear of you treating anyone like this again, Credentials or not, you're done here. Derek's face went red, but he nodded. Paul turned back to Marcus. I'm offering you a job, full-time, as a senior diagnostic technician. Salary starts at $72,000, full benefits, and will advance you the first month's pay today so you can get housing. You start Monday, if you want it. The crowd erupted in applause, genuine this time, not mocking. Some people cheered. A few people were crying. Marcus stood very still, his vision blurred. He thought about Angela, about the briefcase she'd given him, about the years of surviving when living seemed impossible. Yes, sir, he managed to say. I want it. Paul smiled. Good. Now, let's get you that meal and a company car and anything else you need. 3 months later, Marcus Webb had his own apartment. He'd gained 20 pounds of healthy weight. He was teaching younger engineers at PowerTech Motors, not just about engines, but about humility, about seeing people, about understanding that talent and worth aren't measured by the stability of someone's housing situation. The video of Marcus fixing that engine went viral, not the version Derek's team intended, the mockery version, but the full version, the version that showed everything. It sparked a national conversation about homelessness, about how society treats its most vulnerable, about the talents and dignity we discard when we judge people by their circumstances. Derek Sullivan completed his training and eventually apologized to Marcus personally. It wasn't a comfortable conversation, but it was necessary. And Marcus kept Angela's briefcase on his desk at work. He kept his old GM jacket hanging in his locker, not because he wanted to remember the pain, but because he never wanted to forget where he'd been and who had believed in him when the world had given up.